This is part 1A of a more detailed and more careful exploration of the Nicomachean ethics by Aristotle. And we want to give some broad background, set the stage here. Aristotle's ethical theory is based on virtue. So this contrasts his theory with other theories. For example, some theories emphasize rules that you need to follow. These are deontological theories, and Kant's theory is a very good example of that. Some theories are based on an end goal, a consequence that you want to have as a result of your actions. So that might be pleasure with John Stuart Mill. It might be honor. Nietzsche would seem to at times fit into that category. But for Aristotle, instead of asking the question, what should I do? You know, what rule is there to guide me, or what goal should I have? What consequence should I be seeking? But rather the question is, what kind of person should I be? So the ethical question for Aristotle is directed at the individual and the individual's character. So in order to think about ethics, broadly speaking, Aristotle wants to explore this concept of the good. The good is something that is hard to define, right? If you were trying to define good, it's not easy to do. Aristotle gives a rough definition of the good in this somewhat odd way. He says the good is that at which all things aim. So for Aristotle, things have a purpose, a goal. Things in nature and things that humans create have purposes and goals. And so the good is whatever the thing is aimed at. So some examples include human activities like medicine. What is the good for practicing medicine? Well, it's health. That's the goal. That's the aim. It's how to become healthy. It's how to return someone to health if they are sick. For military strategy, the goal is going to be victory, right? So you might try to do that in all sorts of different ways, but that's the goal. For economics, the goal, the purpose is wealth, how to acquire wealth, how to maintain wealth, how to improve the wealth situation that you might already have. So those are some kinds of examples that give us an idea of what Aristotle means when he says that the good is that at which all things aim. Now, before we go on to explore this in terms of ethics, I do want to mention some general principles that Aristotle describes at the beginning of the Nicomachean Ethics. One is that the level of precision for any area of inquiry is going to vary according to the subject matter. And Aristotle then is not going to try to formulate a set of rules to follow. When it comes to ethics for Aristotle, you cannot be that precise. It's just not the kind of subject matter that you can have that detailed precision. If you're doing math, you definitely need to be precise. You need to be very careful and precise with your answers and the way you set up your inquiry. But doing ethics is more like coaching a team for a sport, for soccer, basketball, or football. You need to have a general strategy of what you want to accomplish in the game, but you have to be flexible in terms of what you're doing at any particular time of the game. Another general principle for Aristotle when considering ethics is that you might have this exception for rules when it comes to youth. And we'll explore this in just a moment in more detail. But for youth, for young people, what you do is you provide rules, and then you hope that proper habits develop from those rules. So you do have to have some rules for training those who are young. Now, a third general principle that's related to that is that ethics can only be done adequately when one has more life experiences. So if you're actually going to teach someone how to become a moral person, to do that, there needs to be some shared life experience. So it can't be done by just rules. So when somebody is young, you need the rules that can guide them, that can help them develop the right habits. But to really become an autonomous moral person, that takes life experiences. So for Aristotle, moral excellence comes only by habit. We become just, for example, by doing just things. We become courageous by doing courageous things. Now, this may sound odd or circular initially, but there are parallel examples that we're all familiar with. Learning a sport, learning how to play a musical instrument, learning how to do logic proofs. All of these take practice. You have to actually participate. If you're going to learn how to play soccer, you need to not only know the rules, you need to get out on the field and you need to interact with your teammates and the ball. And so that is similar to how Aristotle thinks of ethics. Now, we started with the idea of the good. And so what we want to do, if we're going to do ethics, is identify the ultimate good, in particular for humans. And so Aristotle considers, as is his habit, some of the common responses to this question and some of the ways that predecessors have responded to this question. And one thing that seems to be the case for many people is that they believe the ultimate good is wealth. That is the priority for them in their life. And Aristotle says that can't be the ultimate good. You don't eat money. You don't build houses out of money. You don't make clothes out of money. And I know, sure, there might be some exceptions with celebrities, and Lady Gaga might make a coat out of money, or Bill Gates could probably build a house out of $100 bills if he wanted to, but that's not the best way to use money. Money's used for obtaining something else. So it can't be the ultimate good. And Aristotle says it's not pleasure either. So even though John Stuart Mill says this, of course, Mill responds to Aristotle's criticism here, but Aristotle says this makes us on a par with beasts. It makes us like animals. Animals seek pleasure and avoid pain, and that seems to be their ultimate good in life, but we're different from that. Maybe honor. Honor is something that is not something that animals seek, so honor might be the answer to this, and that in Aristotle's culture, certainly, that seemed to be the ultimate good for many people. So this is better, Aristotle says, but a problem with this is that it's fully dependent on other people. In other words, it seems like you could be a really good person and yet other people not be aware of that and not give you honor for your good life. And so there must be something distinct from honor that is the ultimate good. Maybe it's excellence. Now here, we're very much on track, so we're going to have to qualify this as we go along. It's certainly relevant. Now, Aristotle rejects excellence, or the word here could be translated virtue. And again, we'll have to qualify this as we go along because that's going to be very important for Aristotle. The problem is, with it being the ultimate good, Aristotle says, is it's compatible with being inactive. One can be excellent at playing tennis, for example, but not currently playing tennis. And for Aristotle, he thinks the ultimate good should be something that is active, something that you're doing, not something you just have and be inactive. That wouldn't make sense. So maybe, referring to his predecessor Plato, the ultimate good is the form of the good, or maybe a particular type of form of good. But that varies according to the specific inquiry that we're investigating. And for Aristotle, it seems too abstract to be relevant to how we live our actual life. Now, he gives another philosophical strategic hint here. He says that we need to place truth even above loyalties to friends. So even though he studied with Plato for about 20 years, he's not going to accept Plato's answer if it's not correct, if his best judgment is it's not true. Now, that's also a hint, a philosophical strategy, rather, when it comes to your own pet projects. You have to be willing to give things up, to go where the argument leads. And Aristotle goes ahead and gives some arguments against Plato's forms and why he rejects Platonic forms. And that occurs in a variety of places in Aristotle's writing. So we have a problem here. We've considered the most common answers to this question, what's the ultimate good? So we're kind of stuck, right? So we need another approach. We need to think about this from a different angle. Aristotle considers then what attributes the ultimate good should have. Again, we're exploring the ultimate good for humans. And so we want to know, broadly speaking, if none of our proposed answers work, we're stepping back, we're kind of taking a meta approach here and thinking, well, whatever it is, what attributes would it have? And Aristotle comes up with a couple of ideas. And he says the good is ultimately going to be the final cause of all motion. And here, that's a reference to the physics and metaphysics. So Aristotle is tying his ideas together, and understanding Aristotle's physics and metaphysics will help you understand his ethics. So the good is that for the sake of which everything done. We have that kind of definition, and it has to be the chief end, right? The ultimate end. So, okay, abstractly, that's what we're after. And Aristotle says, whatever that is, it has to have two characteristics. First characteristic is it needs to be complete. That is, everything else is done for the sake of it, and it is not done for the sake of anything else, right? This is why we ruled out money, because it's not complete. It's not done for the sake of itself, right? It's done for the sake of something else, what we can acquire when we get money. So in order to understand this concept maybe a little bit better, think back to when you were in third grade. For some of us, that was decades ago. For some of you, not so long ago. And what I want you to do is think about your school day. When you were in school, what was your favorite part of school? Now, some of you might be homeschooled, so it's a little different kind of answer, but those of you who are in a public or private school, what did you enjoy the most? Now, some people say lunch. A very, very few people might identify a specific class. Yes, some people might say math. But many people, it seems to me, the majority of people thinking back at that time, think about recess as their favorite part of the day. Well, then why was that? What did you do at recess? Well, you know, some things that people did for recess include playing soccer, playing softball, playing football, playing on the jungle gym, playing foursquare, playing tag. Now, why did you do that when you were in third grade? Did you do it in order to be physically fit? Now, that may have been a purpose behind the schedule for you for the day, but that's likely not why you were doing it at the time. You were just doing it because you liked to do it. Play is something that is complete. And the chief end for humans, the ultimate end, has to be like that. It's done for its own sake. It's not done for the sake of anything else. So whatever it is we're looking for, it has to be a telos, a something that's complete, something that's final, and not done for something else. And then another characteristic that it should have is that it should be self-sufficient, such that if it is achieved, if you have it, nothing else is lacking. It's all you need. So that's a pretty high standard for the ultimate good. Is there anything that fits those criteria. Aristotle says, yes, the chief good, the ultimate good for humans is happiness. Now, for Aristotle, he's using the Greek word that's transliterated here, eudaimonia. And so Aristotle is not using happiness in the same way that John Stuart Mill used happiness in utilitarianism. It's not mere pleasure. Instead, eudaimonia might be translated as flourishing. It is, to borrow an old slogan, being all you can be. It is being the best human possible. And happiness in this sense, eudaimonia, is complete. It's a perfection. It's sought for its own sake. We want to be happy and fulfilled just for its own sake, not to accomplish something else. And happiness, or eudaimonia, is self-sufficient. When we have it, when we are flourishing, when we are being the best human possible, we don't need anything else. So eudaimonia is lacking in nothing. Now, very briefly, before we go to part 1b, let's provide a definition of what we're talking about. So when Aristotle's using this word eudaimonia that we translate typically as happiness, it is an activity of the soul in conformity with excellence or virtue. The Greek word arete can be translated as excellence or virtue, in a complete life. So it means being the best person you can be, physically, emotionally, mentally, socially, all aspects of being a human. You are the best person that you can be in all of those aspects. You have a complete life in that sense, and a complete life in terms of a long life, a fulfilled life over the extent of one's life. And so that's what happiness is. That is a rough definition of happiness for Aristotle. Obviously, this is an extremely important concept. If you're taking a class, this is something that you should memorize. It is so important for Aristotle's ethics. In part 1b, I'm going to go on and we'll talk about how this relates to function, and we'll look more carefully at Aristotle's argument for the conclusion that happiness and the ultimate good is happiness.